My brother held up his champagne flute, the crystal catching the gallery lights. "To the hands that do the work," he toasted, his voice echoing in the minimalist white space. My mother, elegant in her silk dress, smiled approvingly. A collector beside her raised his own glass. "And to the vision that guides them," Julian added, looking directly at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My little muse." I smiled back, took a sip of my own champagne, and said, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "To the muse who is about to walk away with her entire collection." Then I set my glass down, walked over to the centerpiece of the exhibit, a 7-foot canvas called Echo's End, and gently lifted the small brass plaque next to it. It read, "Vance Modern." I slipped it into my purse. The silence that followed was more stunning than any work of art in the room. 30 minutes later, my brother's face was a mask of pale fury. My mother was desperately trying to placate a confused billionaire buyer, and an article was already being drafted by the art critic from the Chronicle who had witnessed the whole thing. They thought it was just another successful opening night, the culmination of their hard work. The same gallery we'd built from the ground up, the same sleek polished concrete floors, the same lie we'd been living for 6 years. "Elara will paint. Elara will stay in the studio until 3 a.m. Elara will hand over canvases that will sell for 6 figures, and she will be grateful for the small stipend we give her, because we are the ones who handle the business. We are the face. She is the engine, hidden away in the dark." But this opening was different. This one was the last one. I made sure of it. They wanted this collection, ephemeral, to be our biggest yet. Julian had pre-sold 3 of the 12 pieces based on digital mock-ups alone. He'd sent out a press release that I never saw, quoting himself about his artistic process and the deeply personal journey that led to these works. My journey, my process. He'd described the way the light hit the salt flats during my solo trip to Utah, a trip I took to mourn the end of my marriage, a trip he called a sabbatical to recharge the brand. He was the brand. I was just the factory. My mother had called me the week before the opening, her voice tight with anxiety. "Elara, darling, Mr. Sterling is flying in from Hong Kong. He expects to see a 12 pieces. You only have 11 finished." I was running on fumes, my hands stained with cobalt blue and raw umber, my studio smelling of turpentine and exhaustion. I told her I couldn't. I was spent. She sighed, that long-suffering sound she'd perfected. "Julian is working so hard to build this for us, for the family. We can't let him down. It's just one more." I finished the 12th painting in 48 hours, sleeping on a cot in my studio. I called it The Last One. They renamed it Ascension, because it sounded more marketable. Of course they did. They always do. They know how to take. Every single one of them. When my ex-husband David cleaned out our joint bank account and left me with a note on the fridge, they didn't ask if I was okay. Julian asked if I could still meet the deadline for the fall collection because a gallery in London was interested. When I was so broke I was eating instant noodles for dinner, while my painting sold for the price of a luxury car, my mother told me I needed to dress the part more, maybe buy a new blazer. When I told her I couldn't afford it, she said, "Use the gallery card, darling. It's an investment in our image." I never saw a penny of the actual profits. I was on a salary. A generous one, they called it. less than what Julian spent on watches. It's not like I needed much. I live in a small rented studio apartment above a bakery. The smell of bread is my alarm clock. My furniture is mostly second-hand. My joy comes from the feel of a new brush, the smell of fresh gesso on a canvas. I don't own a car. I take the bus. My hands, my eyes, my soul. Those are the only assets I've ever cared about. But I paid for their world. The down payment on Julian's downtown loft, with the floor-to-ceiling windows, came from the sale of my Siren series. My mother's biannual trips to Paris were funded by the abstract landscapes that I bled onto the canvas. I poured my grief, my quiet joys, my silent screams into my work, and they sold it by the square foot. So yes, tonight was different. Tonight, I took something back. When we arrived at the gallery, it was already buzzing. The city's elite were all there, sipping champagne, admiring my work. Julian was in his element, a bespoke suit, a confident smile, holding court by the bar. He saw me and waved me over. "There she is, the magic hands behind the madness," he said, putting his arm around me. It felt heavy. He introduced me to the critic from the Chronicle, a woman whose writing I'd admired for years. Her name was Isabella Rossi. "Your use of texture is extraordinary," Ms. Rossi said to me, her eyes sharp and intelligent. "It feels less like painting and more like sculpture. What is your personal philosophy behind that technique?" Before I could open my mouth, Julian laughed, a smooth, practiced sound. "Elara is a bit of a hermit, aren't you, sis? She gets lost in the process. The philosophy, the grand vision, that's more my department. I guide the narrative, and she brings it to life. She's my sentimental assistant, my muse." He said it so casually, so dismissively. Sentimental assistant. And in that moment, 6 years of quiet resentment, of swallowed pride, of patient suffering, coalesced into a single, hard point of clarity. My mother, standing nearby, just nodded, as if this were the most natural description in the world. The critic looked from him to me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. That's when I knew. I looked at Julian, at my mother, at the wealthy patrons admiring the pieces of my soul hanging on the walls. I smiled. "To the hands that do the work," I repeated his earlier toast, "and to the muse who just quit." I turned to Ms. Rossi. "The philosophy, Ms. Rossi, is that an artist's name belongs to them. My name is Elara Vance, and this entire collection is no longer for sale." I walked to the first painting, the last one, and I took down the plaque. Then I moved to the next, and the next. The room fell into a disbelieving hush. All you could hear was the soft click of my heels on the concrete and the faint sound of my mother whispering my brother's name in a panic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply, methodically, reclaimed my work. When I had all 12 brass plaques in my purse, I walked towards the door. Julian finally moved, grabbing my arm. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his face white. I pulled my arm away gently. "I'm ending the partnership," I said. "Vance Modern is officially closed." Then I walked out into the cool night air, leaving them in the ruins of the empire I had built. I didn't go home. I went to my studio, the one place that was truly mine. The air was thick with the familiar, comforting smells of my craft. I locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Julian, then my mother, then Julian again. I silenced it and tossed it onto my work table. It lit up the dark room with their frantic, unanswered calls. This wasn't an impulse. It was a dam breaking. For years, I had been the good daughter, the supportive sister, the quiet genius in the background. I let them build a brand on my back because I thought it was what family did. We support each other, but their support was a one-way street. Their love was conditional on my productivity. The next morning, I woke up on the cot, still in my dress from the opening. My phone had 37 missed calls and a string of texts that ranged from furious to pleading. The first one from Julian, sent at 2 a.m., was just, "You have destroyed this family." The last one from my mother, sent at 6 a.m., read, "Please call me. We can fix this. Don't throw everything away over a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. 6 years of erasure was a misunderstanding. I ignored them all. Instead, I made coffee and called a lawyer. An intellectual property specialist I'd found online months ago, during a late-night spiral of despair. I'd saved his number, just in case. I explained the situation. The verbal agreements. The Vance Modern LLC, which listed Julian as the majority owner and me as a salaried employee. The years of work passed off as a collaboration. He was quiet for a long moment. "This is messy, Ms. Vance," he said. "But it's not hopeless. The first thing we do is send a cease and desist. They can no longer use your name, your likeness, or your art to promote their business." "Their business is my art," I said flatly. "Exactly," he replied, "and we're about to make that very clear." While he drafted the letters, I started my own work. I went online and logged into the gallery's website. Julian had given me the password years ago so I could upload images of new pieces. I never thought to use it for anything else. I went to the artists page. There was one profile. Julian Vance. It was a long, glowing biography about his innate talent and his revolutionary approach to neo-expressionism. My name was mentioned once in passing as his sister and studio collaborator. I stared at the words, feeling a cold, clean anger replace the hot fury of the night before. I deleted the entire profile. Then I went to the collections page and took down every single image of my paintings. I replaced the entire gallery with a single white page that had 3 words on it in simple black text. Art by Elara Vance. By noon, the art world was buzzing. Isabella Rossi's article had dropped. The headline was devastating. "The Ghost of Vance. Modern. How Elara Vance reclaimed her name in a night of quiet rebellion." She didn't sensationalize it. She just laid out the facts. The dismissive, sentimental assistant comment. My calm and methodical reclamation. The stunned silence of the city's art elite. She wrote about my work with a reverence and understanding that Julian, in all his years of selling it, had never once shown. She called me the most important artist the Vances had, and the one they forgot they needed. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. "This is Julian. Pick up the damn phone. You have no idea what you've done." I typed back a simple reply. I know exactly what I've done. The response was immediate. You are legally obligated to this gallery. You signed a contract. I smiled. I never signed a contract. Not for employment, not for exclusivity. That was their fatal mistake. They were so confident in my quiet compliance that they never bothered to lock me down. They owned the gallery, but they didn't own me. And they didn't own my art. That was the conversation I was about to have with my lawyer. The foundation of their whole world was about to crumble, and they had handed me the sledgehammer themselves. The past is never really past, is it? It just sits there, waiting for the right light to be seen properly. As I sat in my lawyer's office, the sterile quiet a stark contrast to the chaos of the last 24 hours, the memories came flooding back. Not in a torrent, but in sharp, clear vignettes, like slides in a projector. I remembered the day the idea for the gallery was born. It wasn't in some sleek boardroom. It was in the waiting room of an oncology clinic. Our father, Marcus, had just received his diagnosis. Stage 4. Aggressive. The three of us, me, Julian, and our mother, were huddled together on a vinyl couch that smelled of antiseptic. Dad had been a hobbyist painter, a quiet man who filled our childhood home with canvases he never thought were good enough to show anyone. His dream was to one day open a small gallery, a dream he now knew he would never realize. That evening, Julian came to my apartment. I was 24, just out of art school, brimming with ideas, but paralyzed by self-doubt. He sat on my paint-splattered stool and looked at the massive canvas I was working on, a piece that would later become the first thing we ever sold. We should do it for him, Julian said, his voice soft with a sincerity I hadn't heard in years. We'll open his gallery. We'll use your work to launch it. It'll be a family thing? Vance and Son. No, something more modern. Vance Modern. He was so charismatic, so convincing. He painted a picture of a legacy, a tribute to our father. He would handle the business, the sales, the things I was terrible at. I would just have to paint. We'll be partners, Elara, he'd said, looking me right in the eye. 50-50. A tribute to Dad. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. It felt like a way to channel my grief into something beautiful, a way to honor our father's dying wish. We opened 6 months after Dad passed away. The first year was a struggle. We poured all of our inheritance into it. I painted relentlessly, fueled by grief and a desperate need to make it work. Julian was a brilliant salesman. He could talk about my art, about the story behind it, with a passion that even I found compelling. He'd take my quiet, introspective motivations and spin them into grand, romantic narratives for potential buyers. He sold our first major piece to a hotel magnate, and we used the money to secure the gallery's lease for the next 5 years. The shift was subtle. At first, it was small things. The press interviews always seemed to feature him more. The articles would mention the vision of Julian Vance. When I brought it up, he'd brush it off. You hate this stuff, Elara. I'm protecting you from it. Let me be the public face. You just create. It sounded like he was doing me a favor. Then came the finances. The 50-50 partnership became a salary. It's cleaner for taxes, sis, he explained over a dinner I didn't know the gallery was paying for. We'll put you on payroll. It's more stable for you. I was too naive about business, too trusting to question it. I just nodded and went back to my studio. The real turning point was 3 years ago, after my divorce. David had left me emotionally and financially wrecked. I was fragile, and my work became my only refuge. I painted a series called Kintsugi, based on the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. It was about finding beauty in the broken places. It was the most personal, vulnerable work I had ever done. Julian sold the entire collection in one night at a private viewing. He told everyone the inspiration came from our father's passing, recasting my private heartache as a shared, noble family grief. He never once mentioned my divorce. He erased my story and replaced it with one that sold better. That was when I first felt the cold dread of realization. I wasn't his partner. I was his product, his golden goose. My pain, my life, my talent. It was all just raw material for the Vance modern brand. My mother was his willing accomplice. She saw Julian as the family's brilliant savior, the one who had turned our father's humble dream into a commercial empire. She saw my art not as an expression of my soul, but as the fuel for that empire. Julian has the head for business, she would tell me. You have the gift. It's a perfect match. She called it a match. I was starting to realize it was a cage. I had let them build it around me, bar by golden bar, and I had handed them the lock myself. This wasn't just about a comment at a party. This was about 6 years of my life, my name, and my father's memory being twisted into something I no longer recognized. And I was finally ready to burn it all down to get them back. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Not a text, not a call, but a loud, insistent banging on the heavy metal door of my studio. It was Saturday afternoon, 2 days after the opening. I knew it was him. No one else knew this address. I had kept my studio a secret, a sanctuary away from the polished world of the gallery. For Julian to come here was a profound violation. I took a deep breath, slid the deadbolt, and opened the door just enough to see him. He was dressed down in jeans and a black t-shirt, but he still radiated an aura of expensive, restless energy. His hair was a mess, like he'd been running his hands through it all day. His face was tight, with a rage that he was barely holding in check. "Are you going to let me in?" he demanded, his voice low and strained. "No," I said simply. I stayed in the doorway, blocking his path. This was my ground. He scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Fine. We can do this here." He gestured wildly at the street. "You've already made a public spectacle. Why stop now? Do you have any idea what you've done, Elara? Isabella Rossi's article is everywhere. Our lawyer called. He said you sent a cease and desist. A cease and desist to your own family." "I sent it to a business that was exploiting me." I corrected him. "You happen to run it." "Exploiting you?" He laughed, but it sounded like a bark. "I built an empire for you. I took your little hobby and turned it into a brand recognized around the world. You were painting in your spare room, barely able to pay rent. I gave you a platform. I gave you a career." "You gave me a salary," I shot back, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You took my name, you took my stories, and you sold them for millions while giving me an allowance. You didn't give me a career, Julian. You colonized my life." The word colonized hit him. I saw it land. He recoiled slightly, his anger momentarily replaced by disbelief. "That is the most selfish, ungrateful thing I have ever heard. We did this for Dad. We built his dream. Don't you dare? I whispered, the words sharp as glass. Don't you dare use him. Dad wanted a small, honest place to show art he loved. He would have hated what you turned it into. A soulless brand built on a lie. You didn't do it for him. You did it for you. You saw an opportunity. My talent, Dad's death. It was all just an opportunity. He started pacing on the sidewalk, his movements agitated and sharp. This is about your divorce, isn't it? Ever since David left, you've been bitter. You want to punish the world. You're trying to burn down the one good thing you have left. The one good thing I have left is in this room, I said, gesturing behind me to my canvases, my paints, my space. It's not the gallery, it's not the money, it's this, the work, the part of me you couldn't touch, no matter how hard you tried to package it. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression shifting from anger to a chilling, calculated coldness. Okay, you want to play it this way? Fine. But you're nothing without the gallery. You're a recluse who's afraid to talk to people. Who is going to sell your work, Elara? Who is going to schmooze the critics and the buyers? You're going to end up right back where you started, forgotten in a tiny apartment, with canvases piling up that nobody will ever see. It was his final, most powerful weapon. My own self-doubt. The fear that had kept me silent for so long. He was trying to put me back in my box, but the box was already broken. Maybe, I said, my voice steady. Maybe I will. But I would rather be a forgotten artist who owns her own name than a famous one who exists as a footnote in her brother's biography. You think my name is worthless without you. I'm about to prove you wrong. I started to close the door. He put his hand on it to stop me. Mom is destroyed, he said, his voice dropping, trying one last tactic. Guilt. She can't believe her own daughter would be so cruel. Then tell Mom to call me when she's ready to see her daughter, and not just the asset her son is about to lose, I said. I looked him straight in the eye, and for the first time, I don't think he saw his little muse or his sentimental assistant. He saw a stranger. I pushed his hand off the door, closed it, and slid the heavy bolt back into place. The sound echoed in the quiet studio. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the sound of my own breathing, realizing that the silence on my side of the door was the sound of freedom. The fallout was immediate and messy, a digital wildfire that I had no control over. The story became a topic of debate in art forums and on social media. Some people called me a hero, a champion for exploited artists. Others, undoubtedly friends of Julian and my mother, called me a vindictive, unstable saboteur. Vance Modern's Instagram page was a war zone of comments. Julian had deleted my simple white page and tried to restore the old content, but it was too late. The narrative was out of his control. He tried to fight back. He issued a statement to an art blog, calling the situation a profound family misunderstanding that was being handled privately. He painted me as an emotional, fragile artist who had buckled under the pressure of success, implying that he, the stable businessman, was trying to clean up my mess. It was a masterful piece of spin, and for a day or two, it almost worked. Some of the initial support for me wavered, but then my lawyer sent the cease and desist and followed it up with a formal demand for a complete financial accounting of the LLC since its inception. That was the move Julian wasn't expecting. Suddenly, this wasn't about family drama anymore. It was about money, contracts, and potential fraud. The conversation shifted from my emotional state to his business practices. A week after the opening, I got an email. It was from Isabella Rossi, the critic. She didn't mention the article or the drama. She just said, "I have followed your work for years, even when I thought it was your brother's. Your voice is singular. If you ever decide to exhibit again, under your own name, please let me be the first to know." That email felt like a lifeline. It was a validation that came from a place of pure respect for the art itself, untainted by family politics or money. I printed it and pinned it to my studio wall. The ripple effects continued. 2 of the buyers who had pre-purchased pieces from the ephemeral collection contacted my lawyer to nullify the sales, stating they had bought the work under the assumption it was a product of a different creative origin. One of them, a tech CEO from Seattle, went a step further. He sent me a personal note. "I bought your painting Kintsugi No. 4 3 years ago. Your brother told me it was about your family's collective loss. I read about your divorce this week. Now, the painting makes a different kind of sense. It's more powerful and more honest. It's one of my favorite pieces. Don't stop." But it wasn't all positive. The pressure from my family was immense. My mother left me a long, tearful voicemail, not apologizing, but begging me to think of what this is doing to our family's name. Our family's name. It was never our name when it came to the art. It was his. She accused me of being selfish, of throwing away a legacy our father would have been proud of. I didn't respond. What could I say? My version of our father's legacy and hers were now 2 completely different things. I stayed in my studio, a self-imposed exile. I didn't paint. I couldn't. Instead, I cleaned. I organized years of sketches. I sorted through old supplies. I wiped down every surface. I was reclaiming my space, tidying up my own mind. I felt a strange combination of terror and exhilaration. I had set my old life on fire, and now I was standing in the ashes, with no idea what to build next. One evening there was a soft knock on my studio door. Not the aggressive banging of my brother, but something hesitant. I opened it to find my father's younger sister, my Aunt Carol. She was a quiet woman, a librarian, who had always existed on the periphery of our family's drama. In her hands, she held a dusty cardboard box. "I heard what happened," she said simply. "Your mother called me. She's not handling it well." She looked past me into the studio. "This place is wonderful." She came in and set the box on my work table. "Your dad left this with me before he died. He told me to give it to you when you were ready. I think you're ready now." Inside the box were my father's old journals. Sketchbooks filled not just with drawings, but with his handwriting. Page after page of his thoughts on art, on life, on his own fears and dreams. On the last page of the final journal, written a month before he died, was a note addressed to me. It read, "My Elara, your talent is a fire. Don't ever let anyone mistake it for their own warmth. Don't let them put a screen around it and sell tickets. Your name is your own. The art is your own. That is the only legacy that matters. I'm so proud of you. Love, Dad." I sat there, on the floor of my studio with my aunt's arm around me, and I wept. Not for the family I had lost, but for the father whose true legacy I was only just beginning to understand. The path forward was still terrifyingly unclear, but for the first time, I felt like I was walking in the right direction. The battle wasn't won with a single dramatic confrontation. It was a slow, grinding war of attrition, fought through lawyers and accountants. Julian, predictably, tried to bury us in paperwork. His lawyers sent back a heavily redacted financial statement that was more insulting than no statement at all. They claimed my salary and the provision of a world-class studio space, by which they meant the small, windowless room in the back of the gallery I'd used before getting my own place, constituted a fair and complete partnership. They argued that the Vance Modern brand value was created solely by Julian's business acumen, and that I was essentially a hired artisan. My lawyer, a shark named Ben, just laughed when he read their response. "This is desperation, Elara," he said over the phone. "They're trying to intimidate you into backing down. We're not backing down." He filed a motion to compel, forcing them to produce the full, unredacted financials. While the legal storm raged, I began the quiet work of rebuilding. I started a simple website, elaravance.com. No frills, no fancy bio. Just high-resolution photos of my work. The pieces I still had in my studio, and images of the ones that had been sold. For each one, I wrote a short, honest paragraph about its real inspiration. For the Kintsugi series, I wrote about the pain of my marriage ending. For the Salt Flats, I wrote about rediscovering solitude. I was taking back my own narrative, one painting at a time. The response was slow at first, then it grew. People started sharing the website. Other artists reached out, sharing their own stories of being exploited by galleries or partners. I realized my story wasn't unique. It was a silent epidemic in the creative world. The feeling of isolation began to recede, replaced by a sense of solidarity. Then I got a call from a gallery owner in New York. A woman named Sophia. She owned a smaller, highly respected gallery in Chelsea that was known for championing female artists. She had seen Rossi's article and had spent a week on my new website. "I'm not interested in the drama," she said, her voice warm and direct. "I'm interested in the work. It's powerful. It's honest. And it deserves to be seen without a filter. When this is all over, if you're looking for representation that's a true partnership, I'd like to talk." That call was a turning point. It was the first concrete sign of a future beyond the wreckage of Vance Modern. A future where I could be an artist on my own terms. The unredacted financials finally arrived, and they were worse than I could have imagined. Julian had been paying himself a salary 5 times larger than mine, plus a 6-figure annual performance bonus. He had used the company account to lease a Porsche, to pay for lavish vacations he called research trips, and to invest in a friend's tech startup. He had built his entire lifestyle on the back of my work, while telling me the gallery was just breaking even. Seeing the numbers in black and white, the sheer scale of the deception, didn't make me angry. It made me feel empty. It was the cold, hard proof that their love and respect had always been a transaction, and I had been on the losing end of the deal. Armed with this evidence, Ben went back to them with a non-negotiable settlement offer. I wasn't asking for back profits or punitive damages. I wanted something simpler and more profound. I wanted my art back. Any unsold pieces currently in the gallery's possession were to be returned to me immediately. The ephemeral collection was mine, free and clear. For the pieces that had already been sold, I wanted a 40% commission on the sale price, the industry standard I should have been getting all along. And finally, I wanted the Vance Modern LLC to be dissolved, and the name never used again. They fought it for a week. Then I think they realized how bad it would look if this went to court. The story of the greedy brother and the exploited sister was already out there. A public trial would only cement it. They agreed to the terms. The day the truck arrived to bring my paintings from the gallery to my studio was surreal. I watched as two men carefully carried Echo's End and Ascension, and the 10 other pieces of my soul across the threshold. As I signed the delivery form, I felt a chapter of my life definitively close. That night, for the first time in months, I picked up a brush. I stared at a large blank canvas, the intimidating white square that held infinite possibilities. I didn't feel the pressure of a deadline or the weight of a collection. I felt only a quiet, thrilling sense of possibility. I didn't know what I was going to paint. I just knew it would be for me, and it would have my name on it. The lesson in all of this wasn't about money or fame. I learned that your name, your story, is the most valuable asset you will ever own. For years, I allowed someone else to be the curator of my life. I let them choose the title cards, write the descriptions, and set the price. I thought that keeping the peace, being the easy one, was a virtue. I learned that the cost of that kind of peace is your own voice. When you let someone else tell your story, they will inevitably shape it to fit their own narrative. Julian wasn't a monster in his own mind. He was the hero, the visionary businessman who had lifted his struggling artist sister out of obscurity. In his version of the story, my compliance was gratitude. My silence was agreement. My talent was a resource he was managing. To him, my rebellion wasn't a fight for justice. It was an act of betrayal. I learned that true partnership requires mutual respect, and respect cannot exist without honesty. The family label was a screen they used to hide a deeply unbalanced business arrangement. They used the language of love, support, legacy, togetherness, to enforce a system of control. The most painful realization was that it worked for so long because I let it. I was so afraid of confrontation, so desperate for their approval, that I became a willing participant in my own erasure. The moment I took that plaque off the wall, I wasn't just reclaiming a painting. I was reclaiming my own narrative. The process that followed, the legal battles, the public scrutiny, the painful separation from my family, was the difficult, messy work of editing my own life story. It was about deleting the chapters that were written by someone else and finding the courage to start a new one, with a blank page and my own name at the top. The ultimate lesson is this: your light is not a resource for others to consume. It is not there to warm people who are unwilling to build their own fire. If someone makes you feel like you have to shrink yourself to fit into their world, then their world is too small for you. Don't be afraid to walk away and build your own. It will be terrifying. It will be lonely. But the freedom to stand in your own light, undimmed and unapologetic, is worth everything. You are the artist of your own life. Don't ever hand the brush to someone else. It's been a year now. The dust has settled, but the landscape is forever changed. My relationship with my mother and brother is non-existent. After the settlement, my mother sent one last handwritten letter. It was full of accusations, calling me cold and ruthless, and ending with the line, "I don't know who you are anymore." For the first time, that sentence didn't hurt. It felt like a victory. She was right. She didn't know who I was, because she had never bothered to look past the valuable asset I represented. I signed with Sophia's Gallery in New York. We launched my first solo show under my own name 6 months ago. We called it Autobiography. It featured the entire ephemeral collection, alongside the new pieces I had started painting in the silence of my reclaimed studio. The opening was quiet, intimate, and everything the Vance Modern galas were not. Isabella Rossi wrote the review. The final line read, "Elara Vance is not a new voice in the art world. She is a powerful one that we are finally hearing, loud and clear." I'm still in my same studio above the bakery. I still take the bus. But now, I own my work. I own my name. I own my story. The emptiness I felt after seeing the financials has been replaced by a quiet, solid sense of self. It's a foundation I built myself, with truth and turpentine. So this is my story. It's not just about art and galleries. It's about finding your voice and having the courage to use it, even if it makes you tremble. It's about understanding that you are the author, the artist, and the protagonist of your own life. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your story was being written by someone else? Have you ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative, whether in a family, a job, or a relationship? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters, and it deserves to be told in your own voice. Let's talk. And if my story resonated with you, please consider sharing it. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone.